We'll finish off this toolbox by looking at the last two tools. And the first one is the Fillet Surfaces Along Curves tool. And then we'll move on to the Blend Surfaces tool. Now the Fillet Surfaces Along Curves tool creates what's called a blend surface, which extends between two rail curves, which themselves are located on the surface of the two surfaces. A rail curve is simply a curve element located on a surface that follows the curvature of the surface. Now that sounds a little complex, but actually it's quite simple. Now this tool will provide a blend surface between several different kinds of surfaces, but be prepared for some difficulties. This is not a very intuitive tool to use, and you'll find that the tool simply won't work in some circumstances. Now, the rail curves themselves must be on the surface of the two surfaces. And there are actually three methods of creating rail curves in appropriate locations. We're going to use this tool here on the Surface Utilities toolbox, which is called Extract ISO Curves, this one. But the other two are located first on the Solids toolbox, and that's this one, Solid Utilities, and that's Extract Faces or Edges. In this case, edges would be the appropriate option. And we can use this one too on the Modify Surfaces toolbox, which is Trim Surfaces by Curves. Now this one you've used before in previous videos, but you probably only use this tool if you had a very complicated surface on which to place the rail curves. As I said, we're going to work with this one, which is the Extract ISO Curves. Now before we do, let's just take a look at what we've got here. We have two curved surfaces, and we need to put rail curves across the face of each of these two surfaces, and then have the tool create a blend surface between those two. So let's start with the rail curves first, using this tool as I said. So click on that, Extract ISO Curves, and look at the options. We want a single curve, but you could have a multiple curve. And if you do, you have to specify U and V numbers for the number of curves on the surface. We need a single curve though. We could specify an ISO value, which is changeable, and we can simply drag the slider here. And this is a proportional distance between 0 and 1, which is saying place the curve on this surface, in this case 0.7 of the total width of the surface as a location. A little complicated, so we won't use that. We'll just do this by eye. Follow the prompts. Select the surface or the face to extract. We'll start with this one. So we select the surface first. And then you can see the rail curve being extended on the cursor. Now I'm using a different color here. I'm using green so that we can see the curve easily. So let's just plop that in place there. Now we need a curve on the second surface. So we select the surface. And here we see the curve again. So we simply plop the curve into place. So now we have the two rail curves. Now we can use the tool itself. So now we go to the Fillet Surfaces Along Curves tool. Different methods. We have chamfer or round. Leave it on chamfer for the moment, and again you can experiment. We're going to use trimmed surface, but you can have no trim, long trim, short trim, etc. Leave it on trimmed, and follow the prompts. Identify the first surface. So we identify the surface first. Then we identify the control curve, that will be this one. The second surface, that's this. And the second control curve, which is that. And with any luck at all, we see the surface. Data point to accept. And you see this blend surface between our two surfaces. So it works under certain conditions. So experiment with this, because I know this one works. This is why it's there. Try different surfaces and see if you can get the tool to work for you. Now let's move on to the next one. Let's do the same thing here. And I've given you some information here. Reverse 20. You see what this means in a second. So let's start the tool, which is Blend Surfaces. Here we see quite a bit of information in the tool settings window. This one says reverse 20. Well, that means turn on reverse in both cases. And set a factor of 20. Well, let's change that to 20. Let's change that to 20. You'll see why this is so in a second. and leave continuity on tangent in both cases. Now again, you've worked with these before. So what we do, we zoom in and we select edges. I'm going to select this edge first. Note the arrow direction. Select this one. Arrows in the same direction, so we're probably fine. If they weren't in the same direction, I would change one of them. Data point, and data point again, and here we see our surface. So that works out quite nicely. We can see the surface here too. Experiment with different values to get different types of curves. Let's move on to the next one. Try the same thing again. This time I'm giving you reverse, non, and 80%. So let's do that. So reverse, non, and 80%. So let's try that at 80. Well, it's not critical exactly where it is, but let's be a little more precise. And now I'm going to select this edge and this edge, both in the same direction. That's good. Data point, and here's our curve. Now the parameters of the curve that you see are controlled by the 80 factors here. So experiment with different numbers here. Experiment with reverse on or off in different directions or both on, just to see the effects. Moving on, let's have a look at these. Again, I've given you information. Reverse, 20. Let's try this one. So we want reverse, and back to 20. Oh, that's close enough. So now we're going to select edges. So I'm going to select this top edge here first, and then this bottom edge here. Both in the same direction, that's good. Data point. So we see an inward rolling curve. I'm going to undo that. And let's take off reverse and see what happens. So top edge, bottom edge. Oh, that one's the wrong way around. Let's data point on that. And try that. Now we have an outward rotating curve. So you see the effect of reverses. And if you change these numbers, you'll see different types of curves. So again, experiment. And we can do the same with this one too. This one I've got non, reverse, and 80. So that's non, reverse, and approximately 80. 85 will do. 77 is fine. Edge and edge. Change the arrow. Try it again. Yes, there we go. So there's our curve on that one. So a lot of experimentation again is absolutely required. So go forth and practice those two, please. Try some different surfaces on your own.